You hear the terms balanced and unbalanced when referring to audio cables. What's the difference? How do you tell the difference? And does it even matter which one you use? I'm answering those questions today. Plus, at the end, I'm sharing a secret cable trick that can save you a lot of money. So here are some of the cables you'll encounter in your studio. Some of these are balanced, some of these are not. Let's start up here. These are, of course, they're called XLR cables. These are considered microphone cables, but they can also be not microphone cables. We'll talk about that in a second. And these are balanced. We'll come back to why they're balanced in just a second. These are called TRS cables, tip, ring, sleeve. These are typically used for line level signals. So these are called TRS. And these are also balanced. So these two up top are our two balanced members of the club. Down here in the bottom, this looks a lot like this, doesn't it? Key difference, you may have noted already. This one, if you look closely, you can see there are three distinct sections of chrome, let's say. There are these little dividers here that divide it into three sections. That's the tip, the ring, and the sleeve. There are three different sections. These are each running or connected to an individual cable inside the bigger cable or individual wire. We come down here, you'll notice this one only has two sections. And there is this divider. It happens to be white instead of black, but normally it looks like this. So there's two sections to this one versus three sections to this one. These are called TS cables or tip sleeve, and these are unbalanced. We'll put a big U here for unbalanced. Unbalanced isn't necessarily bad, it just is. Over here, let's look at these. What are these? These are called RCA cables, and these are tip sleeve cables, because we can tell because there's only two sections and one divider versus three. These, they look so weird, you can't really tell by looking at what's happening, but I'll just tell you that these are also unbalanced. So RCA cables, I don't use those in my studio almost ever. There's maybe one specific example where I use them, but just so you know, they're unbalanced as well. If you see them like this in this configuration where they go from one end is a pair of RCA, the other end is a pair of tip sleeve, that's what you'll find. You won't almost ever find a balanced on one end and unbalanced on the other. There are exceptions, but that's typically the case. This is a headphone cable. They come in two different sizes. The one shown here is called 1/8 inch, or sometimes it's called 3.5 millimeter. But as you can see, it's a little smaller, but you can still see it has three distinct sections or two little dividers. So what do we call this? If it's got three distinct sections, then it must be balanced, correct? Actually, no. Sorry, I'm ruining the fun for you. A headphone cable is unbalanced, and I'll explain why in just a minute. Okay, so these are our cables. These up here are balanced. These are unbalanced. You may have already kind of guessed as to what makes something balanced or unbalanced. Let's talk about it a little bit more because it's actually super fascinating. Let's divide this into two sections. So in the upper section, we'll have our balanced cable. In the lower section, we'll have an unbalanced cable. And let me draw what's happening inside the cable. The cable isn't just one wire. It's actually composed of multiple wires. There is always what we call a ground wire. We'll make that green for ground. And then in a balanced cable, there's what we could call a hot wire. There's also one of those in the unbalanced cable. But the balanced cable has an extra wire inside. We could call that the cold wire, which is this blue line. So we've got the ground, we've got hot, we've got cold, and then in unbalanced, we've got just the ground and the hot. It may be, hot and cold doesn't matter, just there's ground that doesn't carry any audio. The ground is just the electrical ground. Then there's the wire that carries the audio. So the big difference here is balanced has two wires that carry audio. You can see those here. Unbalanced only has one. Why does that matter? Here's where it gets super interesting. So let's talk quickly about phase. You've heard the term phase or polarity before. You can do this test inside your DAW. Take a piece of audio, like a mono vocal track, copy it to another track, so you have two copies of them, and then find in your software where you can flip the phase or flip the polarity of one of them. As soon as you do that, the vocal goes completely silent. They're both playing, they're both creating audio, but one is the exact opposite of the other. When the waveform goes up on one, because we flipped the polarity, the waveform is now going down. So if this one goes up +3, this one's going -3. What's +3 when you add it to -3? That's 0. What is 0 when it comes to audio? Silence. It's fascinating. They completely cancel one another out. That concept is important when it comes to balanced cables. The big problem with cables in general is noise. And we're going to show noise by showing this big, ugly brown line. Cables pick up noise. We've all experienced that if you're playing guitar. Sometimes you pick up a radio station on your guitar. That guitar, just so you know, is most likely using an unbalanced cable, and it picks up the radio signal. The radio signal is now a part of the audio signal, and they all travel down the cable together to the destination. So the noise and the signal, those two different components, they both make it to the speaker, and we hear them. That's not great. A balanced cable has this built-in technology to solve this problem, and it's fascinating. Let's take this same noise, and let's move it over here. And then let's copy it again and move it over here. So on an unbalanced cable, as we already said, the noise gets picked up and it just becomes part of the sound, and that's what we hear. We just kind of live with it. So single coil guitars, pretty noisy. It's just a part of the sound. We're kind of used to it. On balanced cables, however, we figured out a way to make it where the noise does not make it to the destination. So on a balanced cable, now that we have two wires both carrying audio, and they're both carrying the same audio. So if I sing into a microphone, my voice is basically being split. There's two copies of my voice, one going down the hot wire, one going down the cold wire. But the difference is the noise that gets picked up is added to both signals. So if we don't do anything else, the noise is going down the wire along with my voice. But here's what's super interesting. Right before my voice goes down each of these wires, something super interesting happens. The hot wire, my voice just stays normal. But the cold wire, my voice, the polarity gets flipped. Okay? So my voice is essentially going down the line out of phase on each of these cables. If it stayed that way, then the end of the cable would always be silent. That's no good. Nobody wants that. But what happens is at the end of the cable, hot wire stays the same, but the cold wire gets flipped back to positive. Okay? So the polarity is flipped down here, upside down, then it gets flipped again at the end of the cable or at the device that you plug it into. And what happens? What happens is the noise also gets flipped. So the noise here that was picked up by both cables essentially gets flipped like this when it gets to the end of the cable, and the noise gets canceled out. So we have, this is just, the first time I learned this, it blew my mind. We have two copies of the signal going down two different wires. They get flipped out of phase, so they're kind of silent until the very end of the cable. It gets flipped back in phase, and then the two noise signals, which were in phase all the way through, one of them is getting flipped here, and now it's out of phase with the first one. So the noise literally cancels itself out. This is why you can run a balanced cable, 20 feet, 100 feet, 200 feet, and not pick up a whole bunch of noise. But unbalanced cables typically you can maybe get 20 feet, maybe 30, and that's it, because anything longer, it just picks up too much noise to be usable. Okay, so what about the headphone cable? I told you that this is unbalanced instead of balanced, but it has three dealy bobs here. Why is that not balanced? Because a regular microphone cable is carrying a mono signal. It's my voice just duplicated. A headphone cable still has the same three wires. It still has three wires, but it's a ground, and it's left, and it's right. We can't flip the polarity of the left and right because they'll cancel each other out at the end. We need to keep both of these intact because they're not the same. The left channel is different from the right channel. Therefore, we basically are carrying two unbalanced signals and a single ground. So a headphone cable is technically unbalanced. There's a thing you'll see people saying this wrong. They'll say a TRS cable is a, quote, stereo cable. That's not actually true. When it's used as a balanced cable, like a line input, I'll show you pictures of this in a second, that is taking a single mono signal, and it's balanced, so it technically has two copies of the mono signal to get rid of the noise. That's decidedly a mono cable. But if you're using it to connect headphones, then you're using it in a stereo way, and it's technically two unbalanced signals, one going to your left ear, one going to your right ear. So when do we use balanced cables? Balanced cables are really just two applications. Microphones use XLRs, and then line level signals in the studio typically use either XLR or TRS. For example, here's the back of my mixer that I use, my Studio Live. It's got a bunch of microphone inputs, which are XLR. It's got a bunch of mic line inputs, which can take an XLR or a 1/4 inch balance cable in the middle. And then for outputs, it has a bunch of line outputs. These are XLRs that are not microphone level. These are line level signals, balanced signals. And then these mix outputs, it's the same thing, just a different connector. The important thing is a balanced cable is the same thing internally. The wires are the same. It's just the connection on the end that's different. So you could have a cable that goes from an XLR female to a TRS male. The internal cabling is the same. It's just the ends that are different. That's why on this mixer, it has a whole bunch of XLR outputs for mix 1 through 12, but then it gives you mix 13 through 16 on TRS outputs, just in case you're plugging into equipment that has those connections and you don't want to have to convert from one to another. What about something like this? This is a cool 6176 channel strip, which has a mic preamp, a little bit of EQ, and a compressor on it. If we look at the back of this, we'll see it's all XLR connections. The microphone input is XLR. The line input is XLR, which means if we ran from another mic pre, but we wanted to run through this EQ and compressor, we would run it here, and then the output is XLR. So there's only XLRs, no TRS is available here. All right, so how about unbalanced cable? Unbalanced cable are typically called instrument cables, so we'll see them used for guitar and for keyboards. That's the primary use that you'll see for an unbalanced cable. But other situations, you might see some cheap speakers that use like an RCA cable, for example. And of course, we said already, headphone connections are technically unbalanced left and right. Another place you might see is the cable that goes from like a power amp to a speaker looks like a TS cable. It's a bit different because it's designed to carry a whole bunch of voltage, but it's technically not a balanced cable, if you're wondering. By the way, if you made it this far, obviously you're into studio gear and into probably mixing songs. If you don't have a process for mixing and you feel like you're always just kind of spinning your wheels and running in circles when it comes to the mix process, I've got a 5-step process that I think will help you out a lot. You can have it for free. Just go to 5stepmix.com to download it today. Okay, quick story that will save you money. I bought my cables from Sweetwater. In case you didn't know, I worked at Sweetwater fresh out of college for 3 years. I still shop there. Great company. But here's how it works. I bought this cable probably 12 years ago. And the reason I bought a whole bunch of cables and stands because I was going to record drums in my studio and I needed a bunch of cables and mics and stands to record drums. I had been going to my drummer's house to record, but I wanted to do it at my place. So I bought all the cables, which was a decent expense. But the cool thing was I only had to buy them once. Why? So this is a headphone cable. As we talked about before, it goes from a 1/4 inch on one end to 1/8 inch on the other because typically my drummer uses in-ear monitors that have the 1/8 inch connector, but my headphone amp is a 1/4 inch output, so I just got a cable that did both, so I don't need those little adapters. So I plug this into my headphone amp here at my command center, and then I run the cable over to the drum kit where he is, and he plugs in there. Problem was, after 10 years, this cable started to crap out on me. It had a short. It would cut in and out. He could hear himself, and then he couldn't hear himself. Typical thing that happens with cables. Now, it's only a $35 cable, so you might think, okay, that's the cost of doing business. Let's go buy another $35 cable. Not the case. The cool thing about Sweetwater, specifically with these Proco cables, which are their kind of house brand of cables, they come with a lifetime warranty. So I just hopped on my email and said, hey, Luke, this cable I bought, it crapped out. Can I get a replacement? He sent me over to the service person. Service person said, yep, we've got one on the way to you. And a couple days, like the next day, I think it was the next day, I had a package with a brand new one of these cables ready to go. I didn't spend a penny. I just had to say, hey, remember I bought this cable from you. It finally crapped out. Can I get a replacement? And they said yes, and they sent it. It's also true of all my microphone cables, all my balanced TRS cables, my unbalanced cables even. It's all covered. So what does that mean? That means if you buy a cable from Sweetwater, specifically a Proco cable from Sweetwater, you only have to buy it once and you have it working for the rest of your life. I bought that 10 years ago. I can't think of another retailer that I would walk in and say, me need a new cable for free, please. But Sweetwater does. Maybe other places do it. I don't know, because I just stick with Sweetwater because they took real good care of me. Oh, and by the way, they didn't pay me to say that I am an affiliate for Sweetwater, but I just wanted to tell you because I thought it was a super cool story and it made me happy and I didn't have to spend the $35. That's a win. And if you don't shop at Sweetwater yet, go to homestudiocorner.com/Sweetwater. That'll take you to a special page that shows you a bunch of my favorite picks at Sweetwater. And if you shop there using my link, I do get a cut, but you don't pay any more and you get all the great service that Sweetwater offers. It's not all the time that you work at a place and you leave and you still recommend the place. This is a nice exception. All right. Thanks so much for watching this video. Hope it was fun for you. I think balanced cable is one of the most amazing technologies ever invented. Hopefully you do as well. And if you like this video, you'll love this video on why I use a mixer in my home studio. Thanks for watching. See ya.